Okay, hello everyone. I'm ALVES, and my research over the last decade or so has moved increasingly towards identifying regionally distributed words in mainland Southeast Asia. Austrasiac is the center of this, so it's the oldest one. It starts from a period after the Proto-Austrasiac dispersal and 4,000 years ago, and continues into the Iron Age, period of Southeast Asian kingdom. That's kind of where I'm going to be looking at, that period of the Southeast Asian kingdoms. So what are my goals for this study? I'm going to discuss loanwords which are related to material culture, words that are widespread in mainland Southeast Asia, multiple language families, and words for which the earliest evidence for their existence in the region is the first millennium, the Common Era. Of course, they continue to be spread into the second millennium, but that's sort of the starting point. So I'd like to add points of reference by doing this to aid in further historical, phonological, and etymological research in mainland Southeast Asia, so etymology there, and contributing to understanding of language contact and ethno-linguistic history in mainland Southeast Asia. That's what this kind of lexical data does. And, still trying to apply and refine an interdisciplinary approach in etymological research. So that's what I'm working on, trying to make it more effective. So I don't want to dwell on problems of the past, but I do want to provide some context for findings now in the year 2024. It's been long difficult to study history's words in mainland Southeast Asia, other topics of language contact. There are many language families in a small area, lengthy, intensive contact among these various language groups, very complicated and messy. In the past, there was less data. It's harder to look through that data. Lots of paper dictionaries. I don't touch paper dictionaries anymore. There wasn't as much understanding about historical phonology of the languages in the region, right? And so confusion, of course, partial similarity happens, and we all have to be careful about partial similarity, right? Creative imaginations, be careful. And less understanding of historical language contact in the region, right? And a lot of it's was focused on national languages only. There are more than national languages in Southeast Asia last time I checked. General uncertainty of word origins and timing of transmission. And so it's just difficult to sort out these contradictory or spurious claims, right? That's the way it's been for decades. So now, while significant progress has been made, it's been difficult to exclude past erroneous claims, and they kind of linger, right? And many details remain elusive. So I'm not able to. Okay, so what am I going to do? Of course, I've been using digitized sources, lexical databases, digitized dictionaries, relatively recent reconstructions, mostly in the, I guess you could call it this, the third millennium, anyways, the current century. Many reconstructions, much more quantity of data, more fieldwork data, all kinds of things than just 20 years ago, right? So I assembled these into worksheets. I presented this before. I won't show samples of my worksheets, but lots of data. And I use my human brain, not AI, to sift through that data. But I've collected very powerful tools to collect that data, right? And we consider the usual things: historical phonology, semantic range of forms, geographic distribution. Those are, right? You're looking at a lot of things when you're looking at all of that data. So now, the availability of new data reconstructions, digital tools, and ethnohistorical information means that all past etymological research in mainland Southeast Asia must be rechecked. So I can't just cite some smart guy from 1965 and say that was the answer, right? We check everything myself. Whatever I wrote 20 years ago, I check it and I have to reevaluate it. That's what I do sometimes. Say I was wrong. Okay, so what are some criteria to determine these words' earliest possible occurrences in mainland Southeast Asia? So phonological features of Vietnamese, as you just saw, those are very useful, and that's what I'm familiar with. And, there's various reasons it's very useful to check that. Texts, especially the old Khmer texts, sometimes old Javanese, it's not mainland Southeast Asia, but it provides another point of reference in early Chinese texts to help. The early languages, Old Chinese, Early Middle Chinese, Sanskrit, Pali, some others in the region. And this is in contrast with Dayak. The Dayak expansion, more closer to the second millennium, right? Late Middle Chinese, closer to the second millennium. We're looking for things before that. That's what I'm looking for, that kingdom's growth period. Ethnohistorical information on dynasty, evidence of maritime exchange, the rise of those kingdoms and such. In contrast, of course, with the Dai kingdoms, which are, later period, right? Okay, that's the kind of thing. And the earliest occurrence is only a starting point of words history. Diffusion in the region may have taken centuries, but it's a starting point. It's like in archaeology. When did the Metal Age begin? Well, it begins with some part. It doesn't mean metal was everywhere, produced everywhere in the region. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so what are the semantic categories for this short presentation? I will consider these fields. Okay. And they represent spread of significant cultural practices and technologies. And they involve these language groups here that I showed before. For a brief talk, I can't present lexical data from dozens of languages that are in the worksheets that I assembled, right? It's distilled, okay, what I'm presenting. And I can provide all the supporting details for every word. I'll do that in a write-up, okay? Just, you'll have to trust me for now, but, and you can still check me and question me, and that's absolutely fine, but I can't show you everything in this short talk. Okay, the number of words in this study is modest, only 27, but they represent significant cultural impact. And so that's why it's important, I think, beyond linguistics as well. So here's my method. I'll show you a sample now. We'll get into the words for metals for this rather dense data. Under the forms column, there on the left side, I provide an approximate word form, in this case, the generalized form, meaning silver. In the sources column, I indicate that it is from Chinese. I provided the old Chinese form. Then you can see the earliest evidence of that data. That old Chinese cluster helps us to see it. Chinese, of course, the word actually means white, but it is, and it was, and it's from the Han Dynasty, used in a compound to mean silver. So you would say Bai Jin, so it's the white metal, and then the parallel was Huang Jin, the yellow metal for gold. And that's reasonable. This has not been proposed before, to my knowledge, and other people haven't made this association. So you're welcome to check me on that. But I think this is a pretty reasonable case of semantic shift, and there's archaeological evidence, historical evidence for this, textual evidence of reference to these kinds of things. So, okay. And in Australasia, A is Austroasiatic, fairly widespread among the Austroasiatic branches. And then Malaic, we have the Dun Malay, Proto-Chalmic, it actually spread into Malay, an Asian that's not made in Southeast Asia, but that's just to show it. Okay, so this is the approach I take. Okay, for gold here, let's see. Okay, for gold, not the Chinese word, and I believe it possibly from Sanskrit masa, but only meant unit of gold, and so I'm not entirely confident of that because I don't know if we can say with certainty that was the source, because it's not actually the word for gold, it's the word for a unit of gold. And I didn't propose this, it's been noted elsewhere. Or maybe it's just an Austroasiatic innovation, and I don't know for certain. But you can see it is also widespread in Malay and Austroasiatic. Interesting that it's in those two branches, that both of these two words for rather important metal, trade metals, right? Iron, that's a different kind of metal, and the old Chinese is somewhere between that. That Dek word is fairly widespread, and it matches up with the approximate period of the Iron Age in the region. In Vietnamese, it may, Vietic, I should say, may BC era loan. Dayak has this Hlek form, which is not the T form, which means it was barred in a different circumstance. This Tek, I don't know whether it was from Chinese directly. I don't think it could be from Dayak. I don't think, right? So it may be from Chinese directly. So, but we don't know, of course, because that's the possibility because of that T onset. Others from the second millennium include words such as the gum, nun, from likely from Semitic into Dayak, Dayak into the other languages in mainland Southeast Asia, but that's not first millennium, most likely. Maybe at the very end of the first millennium, but most likely second millennium spread. Also the school, okay? I just wanted to know those additional words just so that people don't say, what about this? Well, not the first millennium. I'm looking at the first millennium. I'm trying to establish chronology this way, okay? Okay. Words for metal implements, right? You've got the metals, you've got the metal implements. So the first one here, plow and all, that's been pretty well established as a Sanskrit word. There's some tricky things about finding, concrete evidence of it being from Indic specifically, but I mean, sorry, whether iron plowshares could be from that specifically, but that's for archaeologists to actually figure out. There's a knife machete word, Rama, from most likely from Dayak. I don't believe it's the other way. And the reason I say it's first millennium is because the Vedic form has a tone that marks it. And so I believe that suggests early Vedic Dayak contact. This is different from other parts of mainland Southeast Asia, which is not close to southern China. Okay. Sword knife, the Chinese Dao word, and in Vietnamese it has a affricated onset Z, which marks it as being from the Han Dynasty period. Okay, again, I get a lot of mileage out of Vedic and their onsets and their tones. There's quite a bit I can get out of it, and there are swords and Han era tombs in northern Vietnam. So I have some concrete evidence to support the linguistic evidence. Okay? How it spread into other languages with the, I don't know. Did it spread from Chinese dialects? Did it spread from Dayak? Did it spread from Vietnamese at some point where it was the? I don't know. Okay, but I know that the earliest point would be from northern Vietnam in that period, at least that much. Words for ceramics. I presented this at SEALS before, previous year, but I'm focusing on these first millennium words. Stove, oven, and kiln, furnace, that's the Chinese, and it's but it's only in Vietnamese and Cambodian, so I don't actually. It's not quite as widespread, but it has this aw vowel, which is different from other varieties of Chinese. This lowered vowel, not oo, not o, aw. It's in both Cambodian and Vietnamese. I don't know. I've speculated that it may be a borrowing from Vietnamese into Cambodian, but that's difficult to provide concrete evidence. That's more speculative, I admit. But it still represents the spread of ceramic practices from Chinese influence. An Indic word, likely Indic word, eat, just that first syllable of a three-syllable word, Old Khmer texts, and of course plenty of brick monuments in the Khmer Kingdom era from around the mid-first millennium. I've been checking. It's hard for me to find archaeological evidence that really pinpoints it much earlier. And I checked with an archaeologist too, and I checked with archaeologists, and I bother them and ask them questions sometimes, and they say they know. Sometimes they say they don't know. For tile ngoy, in Vietnamese, there is because of the offset, offglide, that means it is probably connected to the old Chinese form. In most varieties of Dayak, it's moi, not with the offglide, and so that means quite early. Again, in northern Vietnam, that period, not so widespread, but it just shows that influence of Chinese on ceramic production. Now, many words for pottery are much more widespread. And this one, the Chun word here, this is the first of two slides of these, and I've presented them before, just focusing on the first millennium. This one is found in Old Khmer texts around the 7th century. The tone marks it as a first millennium word, potentially in the first half with that F vowel. I don't know exactly. Again, we were talking about the chronology. It's in first millennium, that's for certain. How early, it's a little hard. Now, there are other significant words such as these, and that's precisely that one with the tone for that, right? So, well, we don't know for sure, and maybe it could be as Old Chinese, or it could be just from Middle Chinese that we have no way to determine. That's the point of that. Let's see, and then there's an Austroasiatic word that somewhat widespread, at least it made its way into Cham there. But I have to include it because it is in an Old Khmer text just to the end of the first millennium, there. Okay, a call word, also Austroasiatic there. Again, the texts put it at least 1,000 years back and fairly widespread in Austroasiatic and Dayak there. An Indic word, pot, only taking that middle syllable, but alms bowl is specifically associated with the spread of Buddhism, right? Very widespread there. A Pingon word, bowl, a little bit more complicated. It appears to be a Persian word. Could it have been from Persian directly? I anticipate from Indic. Someone said it was from Hindi. Who knows? That's a little harder to pin down. And then this one's not actually ceramic because it's supposedly made of metal. But I just thought it was interesting because it's a kind of dish tray. And then that was interesting because it is only in the kind of kingdom languages. And so it makes me think of the Srivijayan kingdoms and that sort of thing, prestige goods or something like that. Okay, clothing and material. I'm actually going to talk about just cotton clothing. I didn't have a good category for the term. That's a fairly well-known one, and from Sanskrit there. Old Khmer texts by 1800s. There's textual, linguistic, and archaeological evidence showing cotton being brought to mainland Southeast Asia, at least the first millennium, if not sooner. A widespread word there for the ubiquitous mainland Southeast Asian wide-brimmed hat, that conical hat, is an I believe to be an Austrasiatic innovation. There is even a single image of a kind of conical hat on a down-sun bronze. So that's, I think, pretty good reason, concrete evidence of that being Austrasiatic. Who knows? I think that's the best bet. There is another Chinese word spread for conical hat. Joe mentioned it this morning. I'll actually talk again about it tomorrow. But the most widespread one from an early period is the Mao hat, the Mao word for hat. And there are two forms, and one form is the older one from it's in Dayak, which means it spread later. It was borrowed early into Dayak. But the Mu one, that's the one for Vietnamese, and that again is one of those that has that final fricative and has that tone, which means it should be from the Han Dynasty, based on it could have been a little bit later, possibly, yes, but very early. Okay, words for transportation. The Angkor Kingdom had a road system that's been studied a lot in archaeological literature. And there are two rather important words here, horse and cart. Both of these appear to be, they have good, I think reasonably good Sanskrit candidates there. And there are Old Khmer texts that support it. They are on bas relief carvings, right? So that's pretty good evidence, puts them that far back. Okay. There is an Austroasiatic word, and I think I grappled with that for a while, but I'm starting to come around to the idea that that's most likely an Old Khmer word. I think that's the best candidate for that. It's a little harder to make that certain. And a probable Semitic word, the Jiao word there for this. And because of the Eo, that's parallel to that O to A. This is A to L, that kind of vowel lowering in the tone category, puts it in the first millennium. And, okay, let's see, some others down there, horse, yoke, saddle, those are more likely some Chinese words there. Sinitic to Dayak after the expansion to mainland Southeast Asia. Okay, this last slide, words related to trade. There are two words for flute, and this first one here, the B form is in all, checking this, it's mind-blowing, all major branches of Kradai, so it certainly is a native form from Dayak, but it goes to 962, which is a little bit in the first millennium, so I'm wondering about when the Dayak expansion really was. So that to me is a question, because it's a little bit earlier than the second millennium. That's okay. I think it's a eye specialist to consider. The other one looks like a Khmer form, the Khloy word for flute. This means more likely wider, another potential Old Khmer into other neighboring languages. Let's see. Oh, yes, last two forms here include a Sanskrit word, Jiao, for a word from Sanskrit there. A somewhat more tenuous hypothesis, a word for sesame, sesames, potentially Malayo-Chamic. The word itself, whether sesames came from that area, no, I don't think so, but the word itself appears to be from some early Malay Peninsula impact. And this Old Khmer text for mango, I don't see other evidence of where it could be. And Old Khmer tends to be the center of a lot of these words into the second millennium as well. That seems to be the case. So it seems to be a pattern. Okay, so including observations. What do we see? Significant early lexical influence of Indic, Sinitic, and Old Khmer. Right? No surprise there, but it's kind of reaffirmed what we expect. Regional trade and likely bilingualism. I'll talk about that a bit more tomorrow at the workshop, but still less clear contact for contact situations for this period. But this is a foundation for more intensive regional language contact in the second millennium, more exchange. Some questions I have is Vedic the source of the spread of some early Chinese loanwords into Khmer? I mentioned that one for oven. There are other words that have been discussed in the literature. That's a little harder to piece out, tease out the data. What's the earliest lexical indication of diet presence in Southeast Asia? That to me is a big question because that to me is an important diagnostic for establishing a chronology. So what do I need to do? I'll keep checking that data. I've got my lists and they keep growing. More historical linguistic data, look for more new details. I need to check for the small languages too. The less studied ones are very important now. So what do? Keep working with that history, see how it fits, how my hypothesis might be changed by other historical information. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I might be able to affect what the archaeologists and ethnohistorians do. We'll see what happens. Okay. So thanks for your time. Comments and questions are welcome.